Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. These are almost always on Wednesdays. I should say that with more confidence. Happy Wednesday, everyone. It is today a Wednesday. It's another Intergames Discipline Deep Dive. Intergame Discipline Deep Dives. This might be your first one, in which case, hello, welcome to one of these. Intergame Discipline Deep Dives are a series of events where we have essentially looked at a lot of different entry-level jobs in the games industry. Shout out to, I haven't done this in a while, shout out to the entry-level games hub down there, created by Bird's Eye View and Into Games. We've looked at lots of different entry-level roles throughout the games industry, and we've tried to really understand what makes those job roles tick. What are the requirements? What are the expectations? What are the different softwares that you can go and learn? What are some example portfolios and CVs of people who have successfully gotten jobs in those roles within the games industry? And then looking at those competencies and those skills and those knowledges, we've developed those things into a series of events. The idea being is that for each one of these jobs, for each one of these major disciplines, we should be able to take like a little snippet of something that you should know and turn it into an entire talk. Today's talk is going to be focusing on community management, specifically with the title, Creating Effective Content for Video Games. Before we get into that, just in case this is your first ever talk with Intergames, though, Intergames is an organisation based in the UK. We're a non-profit, soon-to-be charity, focusing on levelling up the games industry, making it more accessible, but specifically for individuals from low-income or under-resourced backgrounds. Really looking at the pipeline from higher education and further education, and how do you then spin that into a career in the industry, especially if you're someone who hasn't grown up with access to, you know, gaming PCs and facilities to play video games on, like the PlayStation 5 Pro and the latest £80 EA video game with DLC not included, etc., etc. So if you sort of recognize that the industry's hard to get into, just imagine how hard it must be for those individuals from under-resourced backgrounds. We try exceptionally hard to try and bridge that gap with bursaries, with free events, with resources, going out to studios, trying to ask them to bridge that gap, going out to education, trying to ask them to provide better sort of resourcing and uplifting. We do a number of other events like this. If you're curious, there should be a link somewhere in the YouTube description. Hello to everyone watching on YouTube. If you're watching on LinkedIn, hello, check out the LinkedIn page. There's loads in our posts that we'll be sharing resources from there. And you might be watching this in the future, in which case everything I'm saying now is hopefully still relevant and the world hasn't changed that much. Although that said, I'm sure there are some things that we'd like to change very, 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 very much. But that's not what today's talk will be about. Today's talk will be about community management. I do some community management, but you know what I don't do? I don't create effective content for video games. I simply don't do it. But do you know who does? It's our guest today, Jarvs. Hello, Jarvs. How's it going?
That made me laugh. That made me laugh a lot. At one point during that, you sounded like the epic video game voiceover guy, and I was just like, dude's got another career in there somewhere. He could totally be doing trailers with that voiceover. It was good.
I do a lot of voice acting.
Amazing skills.
Well, I don't do enough voice acting. Actually, is the real truth of it. But I will be doing more, hopefully. Anyways, let's stop talking
Hi.
about my voice acting career. Let's talk about community management and content video games. Hello, Jarvs. How's it going?
It's good. It is good. Yeah, I'm really excited to be back. I just said to Jonas beforehand, like I did a talk for Into Games like 2 years ago, I think, like a really long time ago. So it's nice to be back and hanging because I love Into Games. I will embarrass him a bit here, but like what these guys do is so important in this industry, so heckin' important. And yeah, I will do anything I can to champion it. So I'm really happy to be back.
Well, the reality is we can't do what we do without people like yourself, industry professionals who do the job, who do the work, who are willing to give back, who are willing to take some time to sort of demystify a lot of the process, and share a lot of what they know. My microphone is low compared to Jarv's, apparently, so I'm just going to get real up and close.
I'm just really loud.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why. Maybe I've quietened it. Anyways, what we're going to do is, we'll be doing a talk about sort of, creating effective content in video games. The way that these normally work is Jarv's going to have some slides. I will let Jarv's talk, and then we'll come back, and if we've got time, we'll try and do a bit of a Q&A. So if you're watching now live, please do think of some questions in the meantime. Put them in chat. Ideally, preface all of your questions with the big word question, or at least a capital
Yes.
Q. That really helps me identify what's a question and what's a lovely comment. Thank you, everyone, for being so chatty, by the way. We've had a lovely, lovely introduction. I see Drillbert's getting some shout-outs as well.
Oh, I love Drillbert. He's my boy. He's my boy.
Nice. The real co-host of this channel.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you your slides. Which there they are. Excellent. I'm going to put you up there. And Jarvs, they're all yours. Go for it.
Oh, thanks. Hi, guys. So yeah, I some of you know me because I dragged you over here and I was like, hey, I'm doing a talk. Come and say hi. So hi to those of you that do know me. But for those of you that don't, I thought I probably should kind of introduce myself a little bit when we start. So who even am I? Is where I'm starting here. So as you know, I'm Jarvs. I'm a community manager at Raw Fury, but I'm also an accessibility consultant, which I do freelance on the side. And that's certified by Able Gamers, which is a charity in the US that is all about accessibility. Special Effect are like our equivalent in UK. I have previously been marketing director at a small indie studio in the US. That's what I did before I came to Raw Fury. And then even wind that back even further, I was a drama teacher. So I had a really unconventional route into games. I didn't study games at university. It wasn't the path that I was going to follow initially, and Into Games actually helped me when I first started looking to get a new career in games. And that's one of the reasons why I always come back to this company, because they helped me. And as you can see, that's a picture of me right there in my wheelchair. I come from the disabled group of developers and indie game people, and so our group is massively underrepresented in the industry, and so any help that we can get breaking into the industry is vital. And as a result of getting the help myself from people like Into Games, I like to give back as much as I can, and do a lot of advocacy for all underrepresented groups when breaking into the industry, because we do need an extra helping hand to get into these careers. And so I thought I'd show you a little bit about my journey in community management in particular. When I lost my teaching career, I was kind of like, what the hell am I going to do now? I trained for it. It's all I'd ever wanted to do. Drama nerd, like it was my life. I loved it. Unfortunately, my disability got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I got really, really unwell, and ended up in a wheelchair. And when you're a drama teacher, you kind of need to be able to run up the back of stages and lift scenery and choreograph dance routines. And so it was just suddenly something I couldn't do. And the only other thing I loved even remotely as much was video games. And video games are like my lifeline. So I was like, okay, how can I turn this into a career? Realized that I'm good at chatting to people, that a lot of my skills are in presentation and community-based things, leading groups of people. So I was like, okay, I could probably do something in community management. How do I get in? Very quickly realized that even entry-level jobs in the industry require you to have 3 years of experience to do it. And so I was like, okay, I need to somehow build a portfolio, somehow get that experience. And I identified that a YouTube channel that I was a huge fan of, still am a huge fan of, at that time did not have a community outside of their comment section, and that was PlayStation Access. And so I built up an existing Twitter handle that I got from someone who wasn't using it anymore, built a Discord, built other social channels for them, and built them a community essentially outside of their YouTube comment section, which coincided really nicely with, unfortunately, the pandemic. But that meant that a lot of people who had no community outside of the internet now had one, and I helped bring them together through a really difficult time, and it made me realize just how much I love this job. And as a result of that, I got a reference from the lovely guys at PlayStation Access to get my first job in the industry. So I then went on to Untold Tales as a community developer. Slightly different from community manager in that you have a slight more of an impact in the actual games being developed, but very much the same sort of thing, all about content creation and community handling and things like that. Then I went over to Republic of Jungle Gerdu Games, where I was the marketing director, and now I'm at Raw Fury. So that's like a brief summary of my journey into games. Bit of a weird way in, but I loved it. And then, as I said, now I'm at Raw Fury. Could not believe my luck to get a job at Raw Fury, because as an indie game nerd myself, I have been a fan of Raw Fury since they started. They seem to just pick games that I love. As you can see in my little drill bit here, I was obsessed with Domekeeper before I got this job. And when I got this job, I got put on Domekeeper. You don't understand how happy I am that I get paid to make content about a game that I love. So yeah, I'm safe to say I'm a fan of Raw Fury. I've whacked on this slide. I'm not going to go through it all in detail, but like briefly, these are some of the things that I do as a community manager at Raw Fury, and content creation is just part of that. One thing I will say about community management is that it will be different wherever you work. No two community management jobs are the same, especially in the video game industry. It's it's a wild ride going from one place to another, because your duty list will change so dramatically. You can get a little bit of a whiplash sometimes. So if you like a challenge, you're going to love being a community manager, basically, because you do a little bit of everything. So these are the things that I do at Raw Fury. And a big part of that is content creation, which is what we're going to focus on today. So let's have a look. These are the things we're going to look at, break them down, and go into a little bit of detail on each one of them, and then we'll get to questions at the end of it. So we're going to start with creating content. Why do we do it? The different types of content, knowing what to work on, and the importance of strategy. These are the things that I think are sort of the key areas to look at when considering creating content for video games. And then, you know, you can ask any questions you want at the end. Please do jot them down as you think of them, so you don't have to try and remember them, and we'll just come back to them in the chat when we get there. So why bother? Now, this is quite a cynical slide, but it's an honest slide. So the TLDR of it all is that, yes, content drives player engagement and retention and community growth. But the reason why we do that is because we want people to wish list and then buy our games, right? So good content and good growth in community should lead to people buying the games. Like, as yeah, I know that meme can be used in every context. Like, I found a way of making it work for everything, Emmy. But yeah, that it's cynical, but it's not, because at the end of the day, we work in games because we love them. And a lot of the time, the games that we're working on are games that we are ourselves passionate about. We tend to find people working on games that they are, you know, likely to play themselves. And so you want the developers to be able to sell their games. You want them to get the money that they've put into it back and beyond. So that's why we do it. Now, the different types of content are varied, and there's lots and lots and lots and lots of different things to consider. Before we look at like why you would choose certain types, I'm just going to break down the different types of content that there are, especially when we're thinking about video games, because obviously there's endless amounts of content. And in community management, you can be, making content about all sorts of things. But in video games, the things that I've highlighted here, I think, are the ones that are the most prominent, and the ones that you'll most likely be working with in video games. And we've broken them down into different sections. So we've got written content, visual content, and event-based content. Event-based content quite often gets left out because you don't think of it as content. But I've whacked it in here because I think actually live things, in person or online, that's still content, and it's still going to be talked about by communities. It's still going to be driving growth. It's still going to be driving sentiment. And also a lot of the time it will be recorded and then will be evergreen content afterwards. So I've included that, and I'll kind of show you a bit more what I mean when we get to the event-based side of it. So written content. This can include all sorts of things. So you've got blog posts, you've got patch notes, you've got lore articles, developer diaries, social posts, engagement responses. It's massively varied. I've whacked a couple of images on there of the different types of things, just for sort of a visual clue at what they can be. But breaking this down, written content is all about like making sure that players feel listened to, that they know that you are working on something, that the game isn't dead, that the developers care about what's going on. It's also about just connecting with your audience. It's about reaching new audiences. And what's really important with written content is knowing who your community or your target community is, because no two writing styles are going to vibe with different communities. Like, you have to know who that community is to know how to write. Because if, for example, you've got a heavily sort of RTS based game that is all about analytics and thinking and being really practical and serious in your gameplay, if you then write content that's all jokey and memey and funny, it's not going to vibe with that audience. I know that sounds obvious, but it really doesn't seem to be obvious, because quite a lot of the time you'll see new people working on certain games and they haven't really thought about who they're writing for. And it really does make a difference in terms of engagement, in terms of actually getting your message across, and in terms of showing that community that you do care about them and you are listening to them because you know who they are. Consistency is also really important with written content. And when I say consistency, I mean tone of voice and the way that you talk to people. Not just in terms of like farming engagement, but in terms of getting that brand voice out there and making sure that the community know what to expect from you as a brand. And equally in terms of accessibility as well. So when you are doing written content, try please to consider the fact that all different people from all different walks of life will be reading this content, and that includes people with neurodiversities. And so I'm not talking about making a dyslexia friendly font, because that actually doesn't really exist in the way that people talk about it, and that's a whole nother talk. But what I am talking about is thinking about how you speak in terms of tone and how clear you are with what you're saying. Think about black and white and areas of gray. Not everybody understands areas of gray, so make sure you're really clear in what you're saying, and that there isn't room there for misunderstanding, because if players misunderstand, that's on you, not on them. So you need to make sure your messaging is really clear in everything that you do, especially when you care about accessibility. But even just in general, it makes your messaging much stronger. Depending on where you work as well, the written content will vary massively. So in some roles, you'll be asked to do Steam blogs, you'll be asked to take over patch notes write-ups, you'll be asked to do things for external publications such as the PlayStation blog. These vary hugely, because in some places it won't be the community manager that does that. It will be a brand manager or a marketing manager that does that. But when you're looking to get into community management, I would suggest really studying all the different types of content, even if the role you're looking at to begin with doesn't include writing that sort of content, because eventually you will probably find a role where you do need to write it. And equally, something I'll come back to later, but if you're just writing the social posts and the engagement responses, you still want your tone of voice to match the tone of voice of your blog posts and your external articles and things like that, because the consistency is really important. So if you are not writing everything, make sure you're working with the person who is writing the other types of content so that you can keep that tone of voice and that brand identity really strong and secure. So my big tip in terms of like the larger content for like blog posts and articles, especially on Steam, is to chunk things. Chunk is my like favorite word when it comes to written content because it works. You'll see I've done it on Twitter as well here. I'm never going to call it X, so bear with me with that. But I chunk everything because it makes it more accessible to read. It also makes it easier for people to find what they're looking for. If you write a huge, great big dev diary, and in a massive like sea of long paragraphs, and the audience is only looking for one particular thing, they're probably going to tune out before they get to it. If you chunk it into sections with clear headings and subheadings, they will be able to find the thing they're looking for, see that you've listened to that one particular thing, and go away happy. Otherwise, you might get them moaning because they didn't see it, and they'll be discontent within that community. So chunking is like the best thing you can do. And I'm going to come back to it at the end, but there's also something about turning your written content into other types of content, and I'll look at that again in a bit. Now, the last point on here that I included in written content is engagement responses. You can see that I've included a little Discord picture there. Now, when you might not consider this content, but it is, because you're talking from a brand standpoint when you're talking in your Discord servers, or when you're responding to tweets or Facebook posts or whatever it is that you're responding to, when you're using your brand account, it is still content. And so your tone of voice there still matters as much as it does when you're writing a formal blog post. You really need to think about how you word things, how you interact with your community, and again, show that understanding of who it is you're talking to. Because even though you do need to think about the different type of platform sort of vocabulary and the way that different things work on different platforms, even within that, you still need to think about the community you're serving in that platform. So Discord tends to be way more casual than Twitter, for example. It's an internal community. It's somewhere that people tend to only join when they really like something, because it's an investment of time additional to just reading a post on a social media page. But even within there, it's really important that you remember you're not just, Jarvs talking to the people that you hang out with. You're talking to the community that you're representing from a brand standpoint. So you really have to think about everything when you're doing those sorts of responses. Are you being clear? Are you making sure there's no room for misinterpretation? Are you saying things that could lead to more issues? Are you responding quickly? Like, all of these things matter, and it's still content because it's something you are saying from a professional account, and other people can then use what you've said, and they do this in other places. So for example, I've seen SkillUp, one of my favorite YouTubers, will quite often use responses that people have given on Twitter as content in his videos. Like, a developer will respond to something somebody has said on Twitter, and then that will get screenshotted and talked about in a video. They probably didn't think about that when they were saying what they were saying, but it happens. So it really does matter, because it might then become secondary content later down the line. So moving on. Word chunk, lovely. Thank you for that. I just saw that comment. So visual content. Okay, so this includes, again, a huge array of different things, and some of the things you will be responsible for and some of them you won't, but you will be responsible for putting them out into the world. So trailers, for example, you might not be making the trailers yourself, but you will be the person that is responding to the comments in the trailers. You'll be the one that's posting the links to the trailers, monitoring the sentiment that comes back from those trailers. So it's really important that you have a really good understanding of what a trailer is trying to say, how it's trying to do it, what it's showing, etc. Screenshots, again, might already be captured by the media team, but it's something you need to think about when you're branding it and putting it out into the world. What are you trying to show by showing that particular screenshot? Concept art, again, probably haven't made it yourself, but why are you showing it? Why are you trying to highlight this piece of concept art? What are you telling the audience by showing it? Things that you probably will be in charge of making are things like infographics, memes, editing them to fit your audience, your situation, whatever it is you're doing. Sometimes you'll just use memes that are already existing. Sometimes you'll be using ones that you've made, but every choice that you make there is really important. Short form videos, so whether that's YouTube Short or TikTok, again, very likely to be you making those. Your own GIFs, you will make endless amounts of GIFs as a community manager. It's a skill that you will learn to master. And then emotes as well. People leave out emotes in visual content, but when you've got a Discord server or a Twitch channel or a YouTube channel, for example, emotes are like integral to the way that we communicate as a gaming community. And so thinking about which ones we use, which ones we order, why we have them, that all is really important. So let me just grab my little slide here. With visual content, obviously it's important that it's visually pleasing, right? That it all comes down to aesthetics when we're talking about visual. Is it captivating? Does it showcase the best thing about the game? Does it say more than just what the game's called? Does it show actual gameplay? Because understanding what your audience wants to see is really important when it comes to visual content. A lot of the time when you watch big showcases and there's just a cinematic trailer, you will immediately see disappointment in the audience because it doesn't show any gameplay. Why is that? Well, because cinematic trailers don't really tell you anything about the game you're going to be playing at the end of the day. And modern audiences are less sold by fancy visuals and more sold by what it is the game actually is. And that is a really good example of modern gaming audiences and what they care about in terms of visual content. And it's one that's so easy to see. You can see that happening every single time there's a showcase, like without a doubt. So again, this does also come back to really understanding your community, because with visual content in particular, things are very quick. It's very snappy. You take a look at something, you get an impression, you're gone. So you need to understand that audience. Are they going to find something funny or are they going to find it annoying? Again, I'll go back to, if you're playing an RTS game that's really serious and like takes a lot of planning and strategy, and you just put a really, really silly meme that you personally find funny, are they going to find it funny or are they going to find it immature? It's really important to understand who your audience is when you're using this, because just because a certain meme does well for Gen Z, for example, on their favorite platform, it doesn't mean that the 40-something-year-olds that are playing the MMO that you're working on care about that kind of content. So it's really important to make sure you understand. Again, would they prefer an infographic for some information, or would they prefer a paragraph in a written content form? It's really about understanding how to best serve your audience in terms of which type of content you're going to put out there. And it also, when it comes to visual content, be aware of your skill level, because this was something that I failed at when I first joined the industry. I was very, very enthusiastic, and I had lots of ideas, but when I first joined the industry, I did not have the skills to create good graphics. And I will admit that now. Like, looking back at the things I made when I first became a community manager compared to what I make now, it makes me shiver. I cringe so hard that I want the earth to swallow me up. And it's okay to admit that you're not a graphic designer, because 9 times out of 10 where you're working, there will be artists, there will be a graphic team, there will be a media team. But what you do need to do is to be able to envision what you want. So even if you can't make it, you need to be able to be good at giving clear and concise briefs to people who can make it, so that they understand the reasoning behind what you want. For example, YouTube thumbnails. It's really important with YouTube that you understand the platform. You understand what works in a thumbnail and what doesn't work in a thumbnail. And a graphic designer, for example, doesn't have that platform knowledge that you will have as a community manager. So you need to be able to communicate to that designer what is important about the visual design in terms of the platform. Now, the best example I can give this without like ripping someone's work to pieces is if you think a screenshot of a game with a very small title at the bottom explaining that it's a gameplay trailer. That I have seen as a thumbnail. That is not a thumbnail. Okay, that is not a YouTube thumbnail. A YouTube thumbnail has certain conventions, and it's about understanding that and communicating that. Whether you make it yourself or whether you communicate it to another team, it's really important. And that is blanket for all the different platforms. You need to know what works visually, and understand why it's different for different platforms. And as the community manager, make sure you can communicate that to people if they are making the graphics, because what's pretty graphically isn't necessarily what works for that platform, and it's your job to make sure people understand why that is. And again, you could have a whole talk on each platform, right, and what works and what doesn't. And again, I'm in the intergame server, so if you ever want to like run ideas by me, I'm there. You can bounce ideas. I'm happy to do that. But learning about the platform conventions for visual design is really, really key here. And even more so, like more so than just that game in particular. If you don't understand what works on a platform, even before you understand the game you're working on, you're already at a disadvantage. So make sure you know that first, even before you look at the game itself. I think that's like absolute key when it comes to visual design. And then again, going back to things like Steam. So when you're not when you're not a designer, you don't always think of these sorts of little things that can really mess you up. And I know my friend Greg, who's also a community manager, will back me up on this. You will get told what the dimensions are for things that you need to make for visual design, right? Steam, for example, has headers that goes across the top of their blog posts, and it will tell you what dimensions they need to be. What it doesn't tell you is where it's going to randomly crop those for different screens and things like that. And that comes down to knowledge and experience. Make sure that you are testing these things out before you have to upload them for the actual launch of things. Make sure you are working within the time frame that you have to make sure that visual designs work once they are uploaded, because just knowing the dimensions isn't always enough. Same with things like YouTube banners, Twitter banners, all of these different things. Is always more than what it looks on the surface. So my biggest thing is make an account that isn't your main account and play. Like test things out, work, upload. Does it fit? Does it look rubbish? I don't know. Take it down, try it again. Bounce ideas off of other people in the industry. Learn from people, but try it. Don't rely on the dimensions, because it's not going to work. Yeah, Steam can be your worst nightmare when it comes to that. It's a great platform, but you need to learn it and really understand it in terms of visuals. Coming back to like all visual content though, one of the most important things is brand identity. Make sure you're on the same page as everybody else in the marketing department. You might be the only person in the marketing department, that's fine. But if you're not, make sure that brand identity is really clear. Follow guidelines regarding design whenever you make anything, so that if you make something for a game and someone else makes something for a game, you can't tell that different people made it, because the guidelines have been followed. That's the difference between a professional piece of work and a rushed or an understudied piece of work, right? Is knowing that those guidelines are there to make sure that there is continuity between the different types of things that you're making. And it really does make a difference when it comes to professionalism of your brand. Staying up to date with platform knowledge, obviously, is really important. And when I say that, I don't just mean things like the dimensions of what they're looking for. I mean things of like what works on different platforms, because what works on Twitter might not work on Blue Sky. And then what works on Blue Sky this week might not work on Blue Sky in 3 weeks' time, because the audience has changed, because it's growing so fast, or because the way that they upload things has changed, or the limit has changed. So you really need to make sure you're up to date with your knowledge of platforms, especially when it comes to visual, because things change. Like even GIFs, the size of the GIF you can upload like is different on every single platform. So a GIF that works perfectly on one platform will be too big for another platform, and you have to compress it. And then when you compress it, you can lose visual quality. So you really need to make sure you're aware of that when you're making these things. And it does change a lot. So never get lazy. Keep on top of that. And then the thing that I think is really important is to consider crossover content. So things that you've done for written content, is there a way you can make it visual, and vice versa? Because your audience is varied. They might all like the same game, but they're completely different people and completely different needs within that category of people. makes accessing content different for different people. So some people will find it much better to read and go through a Steam blog to find what they're looking for. Other people will be completely turned off by that and would rather you whacked it in a video. So where possible, plan your time well so that you can make multiple versions of the same content so that people can access it in the way that's best for them. I've got just a really quick example there of when I was working for Gerdu Games. Whenever I would do a devlog or a developer diary, I would make a written version of it. But then I would also make sure that I use that written version as a script and turned that into a video. A lot of the time, the assets that I'm using are the same. It doesn't require that much more work because if I'm showcasing an image in the written version, then I can use that image whilst I'm talking about it in the video version. So it doesn't actually take that much more work. And if you've planned it, you can do it really well. But that crossover content is key because it really does make a difference to showing your audience that you care about them as a group of people. And that you understand what they need. And that's not just for like accessibility, because it does make a difference of accessibility, but that's for everybody, just preferences. Some people will enjoy one type of content, some people will enjoy another. Doesn't matter if it's telling you the same thing, it's the way it's being told that's really important there. So then we come to my last type of content, event-based content. That is a lot of things. We've got live streams, we've got Discord community nights, panels, showcases, dev Q&As, sometimes it's voice actor Q&As, and then in real life community events. What do I mean by in real life community events? So for example, PlayStation Access fans every year so far, since 2019, a huge group of us have turned up to EGX and met up and explored all of the games together as a group. It has been one of the highlights of my year every year. I couldn't go this year because I'm a new mum, and so I had to stay at home with the baby. So I missed everybody this year. But for the last few years, we've gone every single year. It's been an incredible thing to bring the community together. People come from all over Europe to go to it. And it's just wonderful. And that's one thing then that afterwards we can use as like a, hey, join our community. You get to actually make real friends that, you know, you do meet up with and become part of your life in a way that is tangible. I can't speak, but you know what I mean. So that sort of thing is content because it gets talked about in the Discord server afterwards. It gets photos of that go up online. You have videos, all sorts of things come out of that event that is content, and it might not be considered content when you're thinking about it, but it is. You can see on here I've included things like talks that I've given at EGX Resd, or showcases of games on the main stage with the What Culture Gaming guys, quiz nights that we do within the community on streams, developer interviews, panels. All of these sorts of things are content based. And sometimes that means going outside of your company and working with other companies. I just did a panel down in the bottom there. Cozy Quest, Secret Mode are the publisher that ran that, but they had people from Safe in Our World, people from Hyperluminal, myself from Raw Fury. We all got together as different industry community folks and talked about cozy games. And that now is evergreen content that we can go back to and highlight all the games we talked about during that event, or just talk about why cozy games are great. So next time we're working on a cozy game, we can take some of the nuggets of goodness that was said during that panel and use them and reuse them in different contexts. So event-based content is equally, I would say, as important because it leads to really good evergreen content that you can reuse and utilize in different ways. Developer interviews, for example, if you're doing an interview with a developer and they say something really useful, when you're down, you know, about to do a release and you've got a PR opportunity, you can go back to that interview, find a quote that they said and pop it into your press release. So there's lots of different ways you can reuse event-based content. And one of the things that it does really, really well, better than any other type of content, is foster community engagement and build that community in a way where they really get to know each other. They get to know you as a company, and it's way more personable. And it's something that I think is overlooked way too often in content, and it's so important. You might have seen it on my what I do at Raw Fury, but literally creating an event schedule in our Discord server upped engagement by 1,900%. That's an insane amount, and that was just by having community-based events in the servers. So it really does have a tangible effect on your community growth. So I'm going to go quickly through this bit now because we're running out of time, but knowing what to work on. Informed choices are smart choices, okay? Never just try something for the sake of it. Everything you do should have a reason behind it. If you are new to the type of game you're working on, the section of the industry, do competitor research. Find out what has worked for other people and use that to help guide you. If, however, this is your second, third, fourth, etc. campaign, then use your prior learnings to make decisions for this campaign. Nothing is made in a vacuum in this industry, and there's a reason for that. I'm obsessed with Star Trek, but data is correct, right? Get ready for a lot of data. Data is your best friend here. Use data to guide you. If you don't know what a UTM is, this is your best friend, okay? A UTM is a unique trackable link that you can put into all of your posts. You say when you build it, what platform the post is on, what campaign it's part of, what content it was for. And then when people click on it, that information gets fed into Steam. And when you go into the back end of Steam, you can see exactly where that person came from. So you can see very clearly if a piece of content worked, because you can see how many people clicked on that link to that page. And even more than that, if they then went on to wishlist, and if they then went on to convert that wishlist into a purchase. I can't tell you how important it is to use this sort of tracking, because if you put loads of time and effort into content and it makes no difference in terms of views on your Steam page or wherever you want people to be going, you shouldn't be doing that content again. You should be learning from that. Why didn't it work? What will work instead? So make sure you're making your content trackable when you're doing it, looking back before you look forward. Strategy is the most important thing. When you're planning and you're using all of that data, a content plan is like absolute key for success. Making sure that everything you have thought of has been well researched and everything you're going to do has a reason behind it. So things like understanding how when you post has a big impact on how many people see it, for example. How often you post, and the consistency of that, really important. TikTok, for example, if you are not putting out regular content at regular times when people can expect it, it will not get fed to those people. They will not see it and it will just go out into a vacuum. TikTok will only recommend you if that consistency is strong. And again, it also then comes back to maintaining audience expectations. If an audience knows that you're going to be putting out content on a Wednesday and you suddenly don't put out content on a Wednesday, they feel let down. It might be subtle, but it's there and they remember that. And then next time something doesn't happen, it builds. So that audience expectation is really important when it comes to planning and strategy. If you say you're going to do something on a certain day, do it on that day. Again, I've said it all the way throughout this, but the most important thing is knowing what works for your audience. And the only way you can do that is by talking to them, listening to them, and spending time with them. Use the knowledge you gain about your community to inform your planning. They are the people you are serving, so make sure you're listening and make sure you're understanding who they are. Hanging out with them in community events, Discord servers, in the comment sections, best way to start to learn who they are as people and what they enjoy content-wise. Ensuring your plan serves the go-to-market plan is vital. If you don't know what go-to-market plan is, it's the plan that your brand manager or your marketing manager will do for the entire marketing campaign. Everything that they're going to be doing, whether it's paid media, influencer strategy, events, social media, everything all comes into that go-to-market plan. And what you're doing should be serving that. It shouldn't be separate to that. You need to understand when the key beats are planned for that marketing campaign so that you can be backing them up, not conflicting with them. Working with the wider team at the beginning when you start to plan is absolutely vital for this. And trying to get them to include you in their planning is equally as important. Doesn't always happen, but as long as they know what you're planning when you begin planning, they can correct you. So if they've got like a big PR beat going out on the 19th of December and you plan to be doing a live stream on the same day, you tell them in advance, you can move that live stream. If you don't, and you've advertised it already, it's going to clash with that big PR beat and take up the space that they need to promote that. So make sure you're communicating right from the planning stages. And part of that then comes down to documenting. make sure you document your plan in a really easy to understand way. We use Asana at work, but I've used Notion before. I've just used spreadsheets before. Whatever you use, make sure it's very clear how you're putting your content out, when you're putting it out, and that's it, really. If you have any questions, I believe Jonas is going to pop back in now, and we're going to be able to go through those. If not, and you don't want to ask questions now, like I said, I am in the Into Games Discord server. Please do like DM me any questions you have that you don't want to say now, or if you think of them later, because I am so passionate about helping people get into this industry and also about community management and accessibility. So please do ask questions as and when you need to.
Thank you very much, Jarvs. That was all incredible. It was wonderful. It was visual. It was delightful. It was intense. It was all the positive keywords I can muster in this little old brain of mine. Yeah, thanks very much. That's super cool. I loved, in particular, you just mentioned a number towards the end there where you were like, this simple change, this regular content in this Discord increased engagement by 1,000 something percent.
Yeah, 1,900%. It's insane.
I just want to big up that and double down on that number, right? Into Games, when I joined the Discord and became the community manager in February or something, from January to March, I think our increase in engagement was like 2,400%. That is to say, we went from a number that was closer to 200 to a number that was closer to 4,000.
Yeah.
And that's just through, these regular live streams, regular pop-in chats, and, just sort of regularly showing people.
It's the consistency, right? That you're there, you're doing it, it's going to keep happening, and they can rely on that.
Yeah, rather than doing one-off content that's just
exactly
ad hoc and made up and sort of appears ethereally like the sun in the UK does.
Exactly.
On its own time schedule. So yeah, it really does help. And I definitely I use that number a lot. I use that metric quite a lot to kind of show it's really good.
Yeah.
Look at how effective it is. Anyways, I'm gonna let our audience start to get their bits in now. That was a weird way to phrase a Q&A section. I'm gonna let the audience provide some questions to you, and we're gonna talk about the questions. We've got 10 minutes on the clock, so I will try and be a bit speedy with these. Belen, I can make them appear on the screen, by the way. So here's a question from Belen, who asked that question quite early in the chat. Want to ask, what would be the best content strategy for a game that is still very early in the dev stage? And if you were developing a strategy, how long does that take? Is it something you do in a day, or does it maybe take months?
So this is what I did when I was working at Gerdu Games. So our game was unreleased. We were very early when I first joined the team. There had been a really rough build of the idea out, and that was it. So that's when I started, looking at what people care about these days as a gaming audience. And a lot of that is actually what's going on behind the scenes. People want to know how the sausage is made, basically, the sausage factory side of things, right? They want to see development in process. So dev diaries, really important. Concept art, what's going on behind the scenes, getting to know the people who are making the games that are important. That's all content that is about the making of the game and not necessarily the game itself, that builds excitement about the game itself, because people do care about the people that are making games. So that's where I would start with the content on that side of things. In terms of strategy, it's something that changes as you go, because you have to be reflective the entire time. But I would usually spend the first week I'm in a role, getting to know the team, getting to know the game, getting to know the audience, and then I would spend at least 2 weeks creating a solid starting strategy of roughly what I would like to do. And then it never ends. You're constantly going back to that. You're constantly iterating on it. Or you should be anyway, constantly changing based on learnings. If something's worked, put more of that in. If something didn't work, maybe change what you were going to do. It's never ending. The strategy is constantly changing. But give yourself a good chunk of time when you first start to solidly just build that strategy before you start making the content, because you need that plan in place.
Nice. Thank you for expanding on that. Everyone, just a little warning, I'm making myself louder on the microphone for you all.
You sound great to me. I don't know.
someone said I'm hard to hear.
Ah.
Maybe they don't mean volume. Maybe they just mean like Jonah's actually. Oh God, so don't want to listen to that one. Which, if that is the case, then please do just selectively turn down the volume. Just filter me out. Just filter me out. It's fine. Okay, let's go for next question. Jaded Phoenix.
Great name.
Firstly, a comment. So refreshing to see someone else in the educational field who has successfully transitioned. And then the question: how would you suggest trying to build up that, the relevant experience, I suppose, alongside full-time work? Presumably, this full-time work is outside the industry.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard, I'm not going to lie, and a lot of it comes down to using your own time to do it. Before I even left teaching, I already existed in the gaming space and spent a lot of time as a consumer in that space, and that is valuable time if you want to work in content creation, because you're learning what works from a viewer point of view, right? What do you enjoy in consuming as a gamer yourself? But when you need to start building that portfolio, you have to put the hours in on top of your work, which can be really difficult. Part of that though is learning the skills. So before you commit to making things, make sure you've got the skills to make them, because otherwise you're wasting your time. And that's what I did a bit at the beginning, is I started making things before I really knew how to make them. So invest your time in learning, watch YouTube training sessions, watch talks from Into Games, master classes, all of those sorts of things. Because you can do that whilst you're doing other stuff. You can be marking some papers and listening to an audiobook at the same time. There's so many different ways that you can get that information into your head that is passive. You can just have going on in the background. That's my biggest tip, is do the learning whilst you're still working.
And I want to sort of add on to that as well, where it's a big thing for me was joining a bunch of communities, and in that kind of same way, passively just paying attention to what's being said, not necessarily having the time to engage, because I am in something stupid, 150 different Discords.
My Discord's a nightmare.
But to listen to 10 of those Discords and just always make sure that you read the chatter, and that just starts to tweak your brain, where it's you're learning vocabulary, you're learning what is relevant news, what do people really get excited about, what is contentious in the industry, not knowing that stuff. And then learning that stuff by just being a fly on the wall to all these different communities. And I'm sure it's true for you as well, Jarvs, but for me, I found a big part of what has taught me relevant stuff was live streaming. Having, it's when someone says you have to do a lot of this in your downtime, for me, it was, I already liked live streaming in my downtime. I already had a hobby. So having a hobby that's quite media based, even if it's not live streaming, but cutting together videos, or maybe making sizzle reels of some of your favorite TV shows or content, making animated music videos when you're 13 and you try and synchronize Goku going Super Saiyan with the beat drop in a bloody Linkin Park song or something. Who knew that would make my career what it is?
Why do I feel like we're the same person?
I get this with a lot of community managers, where it's just wait a second, 2/3 of our life are exactly the same. But it is weird how that hobby stuff does pan out. It's weird how it all actually kind of feeds into what you do. So a lot of people will just find actually that your hobby is probably more relevant than you think it is. So see if you can leverage that in some way. And just teaching yourself new stuff as well, I think is really important.
Yeah, 100%.
Just scanning some of the questions, knowing what time we're kind of on. I think this is an interesting one actually, because I'll sort of expand on it as I read out the question. I'm going to read this so badly. BSD Belzer, which is so close to Beelzebub, but not quite, says, I have a bit of a technical HR question. What does your team breakdown look like? Do you break it down by server or platform users, buyers on platform, platforms used to market and community manage? And I suppose a really big question I sort of want to expand that into is how much is under your remit? How much is your responsibility as a community manager when it comes to marketing and sales and looking at these numbers? And more importantly, do you think it's the same everywhere? And I think that's exactly right, because that's worth talking about.
So that's why in one of my slides I include what I do at Raw Fury, because it's very different to what I've done elsewhere, right? At Raw Fury we have 5 community managers, and within that community team we also have community ambassadors that work under the community managers. We are all responsible for all platforms, but we each have ownership over different games. So Gemma is our senior community manager. She's in charge of the Raw Fury accounts, so the general us as a publisher brand, and she's like our voice. And she does work on games as well. But then the rest of us will all have individual games that we work on. I've been on maternity leave. I've just come back, so at the moment I'm focusing on predominantly Domekeeper. Because I was doing part-time hours, but I'm about to go back into full-time and work on like 5 games at the same time. That's what happens when you work in a publisher. You have to work on multiple titles all at once and understand all the moving parts. If you're working at a studio, you don't have that issue. So how well you are at multitasking should have an impact on where you apply to work, because if you can manage to work on multiple different creative tasks at once, then go for a publisher. If the idea of having to come up with creative things for different types of projects and different audiences scares you, go for a studio. Because it's a huge difference in workload. Like, just the way your brain works in itself, like you have to think about lots of different things. But within those games, you're in charge of everything. You're in charge of every platform, wherever the community is, monitoring all of the analytics for all of those platforms, seeing whether something's worked or not, checking Steam backend with, like I mentioned before, UTMs, have the things I've been working on actually translated into sales and into wish lists. All of those things matter. Now, my first role, when I was a community developer, it was a very small marketing team. We were a brand new publisher. We had one person in each area. And that meant actually we ended up working in lots of areas. So although I was a community manager, I also did brand management. I also did influencer management. I did PR. And so those lines blur massively and there's way less clarity. And unfortunately, community management is one of those roles in the industry where there is hardly any definition into what the role is. So every single application that you do will expect different things from you. But bear in mind that once you know that, it is okay if you go to an interview and they're expecting you to be like an influencer manager and a community manager, to say that. Like, now, if I was to apply for a job that expected me to be in charge of influencer and it was only called community, I would want the title to be influencer and community management. And I wouldn't accept that job unless they did that with the title, because that should be reflected in your title so that when you do go for, say, an influencer management job 10 years down the line, they can see that you've actually done that before. Because if it's not in the title, they tend to disclude it as what you've done. So advocate for yourself when it comes to community management and what falls into your remit. If you think a description is outside of just community management, it is okay to challenge that and be like, okay, would it be okay to include this in my title if that's what's going to be in the role? That's what I would say.
Nice. We're at 2:00. Jarvs, how do you feel about one more?
I can do another
question?
one. It's fine.
One more question. Great.
Yeah.
Because just I want to stay on that topic as well of making sure that we're giving some really great advice for people that want entry level advice or careers and things like that. And I think the most common keyword is the word portfolio, which Mivy, our content creator, has asked a great question. I think it's worth doubling down on. So Mivy's question here says, how does a community manager go about collecting their work and showcasing it?
Yeah.
And I also kind of want to reflavor the question as well, or sort of role play a scenario, which is, Jarvs, if you've got the budget to get a community manager on your team and someone's got 90 seconds to kind of convince you that they're the person for the job, what are they showing you? Are they showing you a YouTube channel, a Twitch, a collection of GIFs that they made? What does a portfolio look like for a community manager?
Yeah, it's one that I've had to struggle with myself, because when I first got into the show, I didn't even think that I would need a portfolio as a community manager. I think of portfolios like that's what artists need. I didn't think of it as like something that I would need. But actually, when you think about the sheer level of different skills that is involved in community management, portfolios are so important to demonstrate that, because what you can offer will be very different to what someone else can offer. So me, for example, I can video edit, I can make graphics now, I can live stream, I can do the technical side of that, I can make back end of Steam work properly. I can redesign Steam pages. Some of the people are going to go in and only be able to do social media, right? And so your CV might only show those skills as like a sentence. Visually showcasing those is so important. So having a website or like a Notion page or something that has categorized sections within it of all the different types of content that you have made or all the different types of work that you're able to do. Pick your best examples. Don't put all of them in there because they're not all created equal. you might love them, but they're not all going to be as good as each other. And like showcase that. And by the way, when I say created equal, I don't mean what did well in terms of engagement, because sometimes something just won't get pushed by an algorithm, but it might be a hella good piece of content. So if you are proud of that piece of content and you think, you know, had it gone out at a different time or some event wasn't going on, it would have done better, etc. Or if we just had more followers in the first place, it would have done better. It's still okay to include that. Engagement doesn't say whether something was good or not always. But creating those, like I would say 2 to 3 pieces in each of the categories that you're going to represent is the absolute most. Any more than that, it's not getting looked at. It's not getting looked at. Hiring managers do not have the time to go through pages and pages and pages of work. So be really selective of what you include. And also, when you put something in there, talk about the impact that it had. Don't just put it in there. Talk about why you've put it in there. So for example, if I'm talking about my community events in Discord, I would maybe show a couple of like screenshots of a couple of events, but underneath it, I'll be writing that 1,900% increase in community engagement, right? Like that's really important. And it showcases an achievement, not just a responsibility. And that's really important. CVs too often showcase what were your responsibilities within the role, but actually what they're looking for is what have your achievements been in the industry. And so by very clearly demonstrating that, like, this had this impact, that's what they're looking for.
Nice. I think, yeah, as I see in chat as well, that seems to be what a lot of people kind of really want to engage with and understand more. And I also do think it's one of those things that it's so hard to just look at the like a portfolio and be like, there you go, that's it, that's the perfect portfolio, that will solve all the community manager jobs in the world, because the role is so diverse and the platforms that you work on now may not exist in 2 months, you know,
exactly,
or maybe very different in 2 months. So I think having that living document, having that living website where it's a, you know, a constantly fluxing log of your achievements and your works and things like that, just can be really helpful. Making sure that you have something that's quite flexible, because Lord knows you're probably going to have to change it like every couple of months.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Same with your CV though. If your CV is the same for every job you're applying for, you ain't getting a job. You need to be tailoring that specifically for the skills they're looking for, especially in community management, because the roles are so different. So like what you've done for one community management job will be completely irrelevant for another one. So make sure you are highlighting what they're looking for and not just what you think community management is, because it will be different.
I mean, you know, sort of a Jonas advice here, but if you're going to community manager apply for any job as well, find out if that studio has a Discord and go into their Discord and like critique it to yourself. Like don't go up to them and critique it, but write your own, like, this channel's really quiet, why has no one posted in the announcements for 4 months? Like, start to try and understand where they're missing things, and then you know, basically paint yourself as the solution to that problem.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I think it's quite hard to sort of how to put it. That's almost something we could turn into a talk in and of itself.
Discord in particular, like, I won't go like off on one, but like I have completely burnt our Discord to the ground and rebuilt it this year before I went on maternity leave, and it has had a direct impact on sales of games. Nice. Because of cross promotion. So like things like that can make such a big difference. And what you think of, 5 other people that have been working on the same server for the last however long didn't think of. So your own skills bring something completely different. So make sure you're able to highlight that.
Nice. I think, hopefully there's some great advice in there for everyone. But if there isn't, don't worry. This live stream will end soon, but you know what doesn't end? Us people.
We exist in places.
We still object impermanence is a thing, not a thing. You know what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
Jarvs and I exist within the Intergames Discord at all hours, essentially, as well as many other community managers.
Yeah, we're Discord demons.
Discord demons. So please do jump into the Intergames Discord. There's a lovely channel called Ask the Community, which is just a really good way of basically signal blasting questions at just everyone. There's a little section of the Discord that's just dedicated to marketing as a discipline, like a whole umbrella, which, you know, happy to put community management on there. Same with production, art, animation, audio, etc. And there's really wonderful ways as well. You know, we've got a work in progress forum, we've got the feedback forum, we've got ways of talking about the industry, etc., etc. There's loads of different ways in there to start different conversations. I need to tidy it up, to be honest. I need to burn it back to the ground.
Start again.
That's a workload, isn't it? But please do jump into that Discord. Hold me accountable for the channels that I'm not fixing, and ask some questions and learn as we go. If you're watching us on YouTube, again, link all down below. I think there's a link tree there that'll take you to absolutely everything you need to see. And if you're watching us on LinkedIn. I say that right? Maybe I didn't. But if you're watching us on LinkedIn, just go check out the Intergames LinkedIn page, where I'm sure you'll be able to find everything that we're referring to.
Yeah, I'm on there, by the way. I'm Sadie Jarvs Tasker. So if you want to ask questions on LinkedIn, I am also eternally online on LinkedIn as well.
Brilliant.
So feel free.
We are both infinitely present in the digital hellscape.
Yeah.
Intergames has next week. We're going to be doing a talk on technical design. Right now, the title is focusing on game engines, but I think actually I'm going to reflavor that talk a little bit to talk more about technical design in the as an in-between space of programmers and designers. More on that as it develops. Please do sign up via the Luma page if you're interested. We've got some really big events coming up over the next few weeks as well. One of the big events that we've got coming up is like a 3D character modeling masterclass from Del Walker,
cool.
who has worked on some monumental AAA titles. Yeah, Del's huge. Del's going to be working on, is going to be leading one of our courses, one of our 3-week sprint courses in January. So we're doing sort of a little bit of a masterclass with him. And we've also got an event with Rare coming up. Rare, the British studio responsible for Sea of Thieves and an unreleased IP, Everwild. They've got 5 internships that you can apply to right now.
Nice.
And what that event is we get to sit down with them and we get to ask them all about the internships. We get to talk up to their current interns as well, like people who have done that internship last year essentially, and they can tell you all about what their experience was like. You can ask all about the jobs, and we do a little bit of a Discord Q&A afterwards where we drag the Rare staff into the Discord and make them answer questions in there. So please do sign up for that event. If this is your first time hearing about it, I have been pasting it everywhere I possibly can.
Rare are amazing as well. Like, if you haven't seen their campus is so hecking cool. They do such cool events for their staff. I've got a mate who works there and he lives for it. Like, he loves it there. So I can't recommend them enough.
I have not been to their campus, and now I'm jealous and I want to go.
It's gorgeous. So gorgeous.
All right, next year, not this December, but next December, I'm going to drive down there.
Do it.
We'll do the event on site. Everyone's
Hell
invited. Yeah. Everyone's invited, of course. I'm allowed to say that, surely. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Jarvs, for joining us on the platform. Thanks for having me. All the wonderful knowledge and Dragon Ball Z figurines and. And yeah, thanks for sharing with us, all of your experiences with the Raw Fury and that's sort of the learning outcomes of all the different projects and sort of campaigns that you've worked on. It's been really fascinating to hear about.
And sorry if I rambled a little bit. I've got mum brain. Like, mum brain is a real thing. If you're a new mum and you're going back to work, I understand you.
We're pro ramble here at Intergames. So yeah, no, this is a ramble friendly platform, especially when I'm running this ship. This train has no rails. We're going where we're going. Thank you everyone in the audience for joining us. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for watching on LinkedIn. Thanks for watching on YouTube. And if you're watching this far in the future, hello, do communities still exist? Thanks for watching. That's it for now. See some of you in our future live stream. See you on the Discord. Look after yourselves. good night for now. Bye bye.
Bye.
And the live stream.